Undercover Billionaire walks into his store, finds his maid's daughter, crying. Truth breaks his heart. The rain came down hard against the glass facade of Gable's department store, turning the city outside into a blur of gray steel and trembling lights. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, polished brass, and digital displays flashing luxury brands that promised a happiness money could buy. And yet, to Harrison Gable, the man who owned every inch of it, the place felt hollow. He stood in his private office on the top floor, watching employees rush below like clockwork figures. On the desk lay a single anonymous envelope, no logo, no name, only 7 words written in a hurried hand. Please see what's really happening here. For 30 years, Gable's had been his empire, a symbol of endurance, of his grandfather's immigrant dream. Now that dream was cracking. Complaints had trickled in from the lower levels, unpaid overtime, harassment, despair disguised as loyalty. Harrison had built walls of trust around himself, but this letter slipped through. That night, he made a decision that startled even him. He would disappear. The next morning, the billionaire was gone. In his place stood Harry Gibson, 63, widowed, broke, carrying a cardboard suitcase and a resume printed on cheap paper. His gray hair was unstyled, his glasses smudged, his coat threadbare. No one would see the powerful man beneath the tired eyes. He applied for a janitor's position at one of his own stores, the flagship location in downtown Chicago. The hiring clerk barely looked up as she mumbled, "You'll be on the night shift, minimum wage, no benefits. Still want it?" Harry nodded. "I'm grateful for the chance." When he stepped into the service elevator that evening, surrounded by mops and detergent, he felt something he hadn't in decades: anonymity. It was oddly freeing. He was no longer the billionaire everyone feared. He was invisible. Halfway through his first shift, as he pushed a mop down the empty corridor, he heard it, the soft, broken sound of a child crying. It came from behind the supply closet door. He opened it gently. A little girl sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, clutching a half-eaten apple and a coloring book with torn pages. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. "Are you lost?" The girl shook her head. "No, sir. I'm waiting for my mom. She works here. Please don't tell Mr. Doyle." "Who's Mr. Doyle?" "The boss. He said if he ever finds me here, my mom will lose her job." The little girl's voice trembled, and something inside Harrison's chest did too. He offered the girl his handkerchief. She took it like a secret and pressed it to her eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. "Chloe," she whispered. "Chloe Vance." "Hi, Chloe. I'm Harry." It still startled him how easily the false name sat in his mouth. "Where's your mom right now?" "Cleaning the 4th-floor bathrooms." Chloe's chin wobbled. "We missed the bus. She said I could sit quiet and read until she's done. But Mr. Doyle—" She flinched just saying it. "He said kids like me scare customers." Harrison felt the old steel lift inside him, the part that had negotiated hostile takeovers without blinking. It was strange to feel it turn on his own house. "Do you like to read?" he asked. Chloe brightened a little and dug a photo from her pocket, the edges worn to velvet. A man in desert fatigues looked back, square jaw, eyes that had seen distance and come home anyway. "This is my great-grandpa," she said proudly, "General Robert Vance. Mom says he taught her to stand up straight even when it hurts." She swallowed. "But sometimes it hurts a lot." He passed the photo back. "Your great-grandpa would be glad you're brave," he said. and I bet your mom is braver than both of us. Gable's after hours was a different animal. Music off, escalators stilled, the perfume of the sales floor traded for the sting of ammonia. Harry Gibson, janitor, pushed a cart past mannequins that looked like bored ghosts and learned the geography of his empire from the underside, where spills happened, where tiles were loose, which cameras had blind spots. The security guard at the dock barely glanced at him. The sales associates in their black uniforms swept past with the weary, brittle pep of people who knew smiles were part of the dress code. Invisible was the uniform he wore best. He met Eleanor Vance at 10:07 p.m. outside a restroom where a yellow cone warned of a floor that seemed to never dry. She was slender, late 30s, her hair pulled back in a knot that meant business, her hands red from chemicals. Dignity clung to her like starch. She noticed his limp first, the way his hip caught when he turned with the mop. He noticed hers second, an old injury that flared when she bent, compensated for with disciplined grace. "You're new," she said, not unkindly. "Harry," he said, offering a gloved hand. "Eleanor." A nod, then back to work. They moved in rhythm for a while, spray, wipe, rinse, until the quiet let conversation thread through. "What shift do you have?" he asked. "Whatever they give me," she said. "Nights mostly. Easier to find someone to watch my daughter when she's asleep." She didn't add when I can afford it. She didn't have to. He kept his voice light. "Hard to get by on this pay." She gave a tiny smile. "You learn to negotiate with yourself. Lights off by 11. Coupons. Stretch the soap." She rinsed a rag in the sink, wrung it with practiced cruelty. "I used to be an assistant at a law firm after my husband died. Training accident, firehouse. Well, grief eats time. Jobs don't like that." "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it. She nodded, eyes steady. "We're okay. Chloe's the point of the compass. You hold it and you walk." Frank Doyle came down the corridor like a weather front. Brisk steps, expensive watch, a smile trimmed to the edge of insult. He was mid-40s, handsome in the forgettable way of people who mistake cruelty for charisma. He checked his tablet without looking at them. "Vance, the luxury wing looks like it hasn't seen a mop in a week. Are you trying to give me a lawsuit?" Eleanor straightened. "We finished that an hour ago. I can show you the log." "What you can show me is the floor in the atrium," he said. "There's a scuff near the display. Unacceptable." Only then did he flick his gaze to Harry, as if noticing a stain. "And who's this?" "Harry, new hire." Doyle's mouth twitched. "Make sure he understands our standards. And Vance?" His tone dropped, private and ugly. "If I find your kid in my store again, you're gone. This isn't a daycare. You want second chances? Ask someone who believes in charity." Harrison watched Eleanor swallow whatever she wanted to say. Her knuckles whitened around the handle of the cart. "Yes, sir." Doyle left a smell like cold coffee behind him. Harrison's jaw ached from not speaking. He had built a machine that could lift families. Here was a gear grinding them down because it could. Later, in the freight elevator, he asked softly, "Is he always like that?" "Worse when corporate's watching," she said. "He likes to be the hero. Numbers up, costs down, employees replaceable." The elevator groaned. "It's just a job." He almost said, "It's my name on the door." Instead, he said, "It doesn't have to be this way." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I've learned not to wait for cavalry." He saw the deeper map then, the one hidden beneath inventory sheets, the quiet economy of favors and kindnesses. George in shipping, hands unsteady with a familial tremor, moving slower but staying late. Anita, from cosmetics, slipping granola bars into Eleanor's pocket on her break. A cashier covering for a stock boy who napped 10 minutes in the break room because he worked a second job overnight. The place ran not on profits, but on small mercies. He had ached for a story that would indict one villain. What he found was a network of fear and endurance, propped up by the decent. Around 1 a.m., he found Chloe again, curled on a folding chair in the supply room, coloring within the lines with fierce concentration. "Mom says color holds the world together," she said without looking up. "When she's sad, she irons. When I'm sad, I color." He sat on an upturned crate. "What do you do when you're brave?" She considered. "I tell the truth, even when my voice shakes." She finally looked at him. "Sir, are you the kind of grown-up who makes people scared?" He blinked. In another life, the answer was complicated. "I'm trying not to be," he said. By 3, he knew the secret budgets Doyle ran. Dilution ratios pushed past safety, supply orders shaved and pocketed, overtime refused but demanded. He started taking notes the way he'd taken notes as a young man. Precise, unemotional, lethal in their simplicity. He also mopped the marble until it held a reflection he could stand to see. On his break, he ate from the vending machine beside Eleanor, 2 granola bars, 1 shared. She stretched her leg and winced. "Ignore it long enough and it forgets to complain," she said. He shook his head. "That's not how bodies work." She shrugged. "It's how bills work." The city woke slowly outside, a blush of light edging the lake. In his pocket, his phone, a different number, a different life, buzzed with messages from executives who thought they ran his mornings. He turned it off. He wasn't done being no one. Near the end of shift, Doyle set the stage. In the atrium, a perfect floor. On that floor, a thumbprint smear of shoe wax he had planted himself. Harrison had watched him do it on a camera feed in the stock room. The manager brought everyone to witness the sin. "This," he announced, pointing like a judge, "is negligence." He turned to Eleanor. "Stay. Redo the entire level. Off the clock." Harrison stepped forward before the old him could argue. "She won't be staying alone," he said mildly. "Dock my pay and I'll help." Doyle's eyes narrowed. "You don't tell me how to run my store." "I'm not," Harrison said. "I'm telling you how I'll spend my time." The manager's smile cut. "You're both fired." For one beat, Harrison let the word hang. Fired. He remembered when it meant loss. Now, it sounded like a match. He reached into the inside pocket of his shabby coat and pulled out the matte black card he had brought as both evidence and mirror. He watched Doyle read the name once, frown, read it again, and then look up like a man who had just realized the ocean could take him. Harrison Gable, chairman and CEO. In the silence that followed, the store felt like a cathedral. Somewhere on the mezzanine, the sun reached the polished rail and lit it gold. Eleanor didn't gasp. She just exhaled. Harrison put the card away. "Ms. Vance, please take the rest of the day to be with your daughter," he said gently. "You'll be paid for the full shift." He turned to Doyle without heat. "Collect your things. Security will escort you out in 5 minutes. HR will be in touch about your severance, if any." Doyle flushed, then blanched, then tried to speak. Harrison lifted a hand, and the words died. He faced the watching employees. "I owe you an apology," he said simply, "for not seeing what was right in front of me." He tipped his chin toward Eleanor. That ends today. He didn't yet know exactly how, but the promise landed true. Across a lifetime of polished speeches, it was the first time his voice sounded like home to him. The morning news spread faster than the dawn. By the time the sun cleared the Chicago skyline, everyone at Gable's department store had heard the story. The new janitor, who turned out to be the owner himself, and the manager who had humiliated him. Corporate executives tried to contain it, but social media had already exploded. An employee had filmed part of the confrontation. Doyle's voice dripping contempt as he berated Eleanor, the soft gasp when the janitor revealed the black CEO card. The clip had been shared 1,000,000 times before breakfast, captioned, "Billionaire goes undercover, finds truth in his own store." While Harrison's PR team scrambled, he didn't call them. He wasn't hiding in his penthouse. He was back at the store, standing among the same workers who had feared Doyle the night before. He moved through the aisles quietly, shaking hands, listening. It wasn't the kind of tour his assistant would have arranged. There were no cameras, no staged smiles. The staff looked at him like a ghost, half awe, half guilt. He understood it. They weren't used to being seen. "Mr. Gable, I didn't know it was really you," a cashier stammered. "If I had—" He stopped her gently. "Then you'd have treated me differently. And that's exactly why I came." Upstairs, the board of directors was less sentimental. When he finally entered the glass-walled conference room, the air was already tense. Charts glowed on the digital wall, stock fluctuations, loss projections, trending hashtags. Gregory Miles, his CFO, cleared his throat. "Harrison, you've started a media storm. We've got investors demanding statements, unions pushing for audits, and HR complaining that you personally fired a manager without protocol. Doyle's already contacted his lawyer." "He can call whoever he wants," Harrison said calmly, taking a seat. "I don't negotiate with bullies." A murmur swept the room. Victoria Lang, a board member with a permanent half-smile, leaned forward. "With all due respect, you humiliated a man publicly in front of hourly workers. That's reckless leadership. We're a company, not a charity." Harrison turned his gaze to her, cool, unwavering. "And yet the company I've founded has been running on theft and intimidation. I think charity is the least of our sins." Another director, Harper, spoke up. "No one's denying what happened, but you've created a dangerous precedent. What's next? You'll replace every manager personally? Audit every store? You can't run an empire like a rescue mission." Harrison folded his hands. "Watch me." Victoria scoffed. "Our shareholders—" "Can thank me later," he interrupted, "because this time we're saving the soul of the brand they invested in." Silence. He rose, walking toward the panoramic window overlooking the city. "Do you know what I saw last night?" he said softly. "I saw a widow scrubbing floors with hands that used to hold legal briefs. I saw a veteran's granddaughter hiding from a man paid to protect her mother. And I saw a system we built, my system, that rewarded cruelty and punished kindness." He turned, meeting each of their eyes. "If that's what success looks like, I want no part of it." For the first time in years, the room had no answer. He ended the meeting with a single directive: a full internal audit of employee treatment, pay equity, and store management practices. Any abuse uncovered would result in immediate termination. No exceptions. That night, alone in his office, Harrison sat in the dark, the only light coming from the city outside. He thought of Eleanor and Chloe, of the tired smile in the break room, the quiet dignity she had worn like armor. On his desk lay an old photograph of his father, Walter Gable, the man who had built the first store with his bare hands. Behind him, painted in dust on a warehouse wall, were the words, "Serve with honor, lead with heart." Harrison ran his thumb across the words and whispered, "I forgot, Dad, but I'm remembering now." Downstairs, Doyle's office was being emptied. The man who once strutted through the halls now stood in silence as security boxed his things. He didn't meet anyone's eyes. His downfall was swift, but Harrison felt no pleasure in it, only a heavy, necessary justice. Outside the store, a winter wind swept through Michigan Avenue, cold and cleansing. Harrison stepped into it, coat collar up, head bowed. For the first time, he wasn't sure what the next move would be, only that he wouldn't stop until the house his family built stood for something again. He didn't drive home that night. Instead, Harrison found himself on the highway leading out of the city, chasing ghosts he hadn't intended to meet again. The rain had stopped, but the world was still slick with memory. His old driver used to take this same route when they visited the first Gable store, a narrow brick building in the industrial district now abandoned. The sign still hung, faded but proud. Gable's General Goods, honest prices for honest work. His grandfather's motto. He parked out front, stepping into the cold air. The smell of dust and machine oil hit him instantly, sharp and familiar. He had been a boy when he first walked through these doors, holding his father's hand. Walter Gable had believed in three things: work hard, pay fair, and never walk past a man in need. Harrison had once sworn to live by those words, until he didn't. Inside, the floorboards creaked beneath his shoes. His reflection stared back at him in a cracked mirror. A man who looked more like his father than he'd ever admit. He remembered being 15, working nights at this store after school. Back then, they didn't have janitors. Everyone cleaned their own section. He'd watched his father polish the floors long after closing, humming under his breath, saying, "If the people who build it don't respect it, nobody will." Harrison had believed him. But when his father died suddenly of a stroke and the company fell to him, the world changed. The board wanted expansion, investors wanted numbers, and Harrison, still grieving, still too young, decided the best way to honor his father was to make Gable's indestructible. He'd succeeded. Profits tripled, stores multiplied, and his name became legend. But in the climb, something inside him had calcified. He learned to replace compassion with efficiency, promises with policies, people with performance metrics. He built a fortress of glass and chrome, one even kindness couldn't breach. And now it had taken a crying child in a janitor's closet to crack it open. He sat down on the old wooden counter, brushing away dust until the Gable family crest appeared beneath his hand. Two clasped palms, surrounded by the words, "Integrity above all." The same symbol that now adorned the corner of every invoice, every receipt, every commercial. It had become branding. He realized it was never meant to be branding. It was supposed to be truth. He closed his eyes. Behind his lids, memory played like film. He saw his wife, Ellen, laughing in their garden before her illness hollowed her out. She had been the last person who dared challenge him, who told him he was forgetting the people who built the floors you walk on. When she died, the silence became his business partner. He saw his son Adam storming out of the mansion 5 years ago. "You run a company like a kingdom," Adam had said, "but you don't rule hearts, Dad. You crush them." He hadn't spoken to him since. A single sound broke the stillness. His phone vibrating. A text from Eleanor. "Mr. Gable, I wanted to thank you. Chloe's asleep. She says you're like the man in her great-grandpa's story, the one who fought for people nobody listened to." He stared at the words for a long time, then typed back only two. "I'm trying." He stayed in that store until sunrise, the light cutting through the broken windows like mercy. By morning, he was back at headquarters. His assistant froze when he walked in, unshaven, in the same worn coat. "Sir, you have the board meeting." "Cancel it," he said. "Get me HR, compliance, and facilities. We're rebuilding from the ground up." She blinked. "Sir, that'll take months." "Good," he said. "We've wasted years." The next weeks blurred into purpose. Harrison personally reviewed every regional report. He spoke with cashiers, stockers, janitors, the people whose names he had once never known. Each story was a small wound he carried home at night. He didn't tell anyone, but he began visiting Ellen's grave again. One evening, he stood there in the wind, speaking quietly to the marble. "I used to think my empire was proof I'd done something right," he said. "Turns out it was proof I stopped listening." He set down a single white lily, her favorite. "I met a little girl named Chloe," he murmured. "She reminds me of you, brave, honest. She looks at people the way you used to look at me, like there's still something left worth saving." He exhaled, the sound raw. "If you can hear me, I'm going to fix this, all of it." For the first time in decades, he meant it. The day the press descended felt like a storm rolling in on polished shoes. Reporters clustered outside Gable headquarters, microphones lifted like a field of metal flowers, camera lights stinging the winter air. Harrison watched from behind the curtain, palms resting on the lectern he hadn't used in years. On the front row, he saw employees in plain uniforms, cashiers, stockers, a janitor with a tremor in his hands, sitting shoulder to shoulder with analysts in tailored suits. It looked wrong together and also right. He stepped out to a hush that startled him. No walk-up music, no sizzle reel, just the weight of expectation. "I built this company," he began, voice steady, "and then I let it run without its heart. No legalese, no blame shifting. Last week I saw what that costs. A widow punished for surviving, a child afraid to be found, people who keep the lights on treated like shadows. That ends now." He didn't look at the board members. He looked at the workers. Effective immediately. Every store is under audit for pay equity and manager conduct. Wage theft will be repaid with interest. Overtime will be honored. Anonymous reporting goes to an outside firm with power to act. Managers found using intimidation will be removed. No second chances. We're funding healthcare stipends for hourly employees, and we're creating a national role to ensure the well-being of our staff, reporting directly to me. A murmur rippled. A reporter shot up a hand. "Mr. Gable, is this PR?" "No," he said, silencing the room without raising his voice. "This is confession. It's also policy." From the side aisle, a young man stood, store badge still clipped to his jacket. "Sir, I've been written up 3 times for being slow because my hands shake. Do I still have a job?" Harrison met his eyes. "Yes, and you'll have medical coverage for the reason your hands shake." A woman called out, "What about managers like Doyle?" "Gone," he said, "and so was the culture that made him possible." He didn't try to win the room. He tried to speak true in it. "Numbers will dip," he warned the investors bluntly. Change costs, but profit built on fear is a bill that always comes due. I'm choosing to pay it now. Afterward, he walked the floor of a store he hadn't visited in daylight in years. He replaced a cracked break room microwave himself while the facilities crew waited on a delivery. He ate brown bag sandwiches with cashiers, asked about bus routes and rent hikes, and made notes on sticky pads like a rookie manager. Word traveled faster than his PR could keep up. The chairman had rolled up his sleeves and started patching the ship himself. That afternoon, he found Eleanor in the flagship store's old manager office, Doyle's former kingdom. The nameplate was gone. The walls were bare, the air oddly clean. She stood by the window, hands clasped to still their tremor, not from fear, but from the gravity of it. "This role, what you described," she said quietly, "you meant me." "If you'll take it," he said. "Director of Employee Welfare, authority to walk into any store without notice, to listen, to act. No one outranks you on matters of dignity. That includes me." She let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "You outrank everyone." "Not on this," he said. "I can build a system. You can keep it human." She touched the sill, eyes bright. "If we do this, we do it for all the Chloes in all the closets." "For all the Chloes," he agreed. They shook hands. Not a ceremonial grip for cameras, something smaller and more binding. By evening, he was back on the sales floor when a familiar tug at his coat announced Chloe herself. "Mom says I should say thank you," she declared, chin brave. "You already did," he said. "You told the truth." She held up the faded photograph of General Robert Vance. "He said leaders eat last." "Then I'll start learning," Harrison murmured, and meant it. On his way out, he paused beneath the founding plaque where his grandfather's motto hung as if waiting for someone to reread it. "Serve with honor, lead with heart." The words didn't feel like branding anymore. They felt like a map. He folded the day into his pocket the way he'd folded anonymous notes and signed checks and old regrets. Only this time, the weight he carried wasn't shame. It was responsibility, newly claimed. The storm outside had passed. The city shone, not cleaner, not richer, but clearer. For the first time in a long time, he could see where to aim his steps. Within weeks, the shock had settled into momentum. What began as scandal had transformed into movement. The tabloids called it the Gable Reformation. Analysts called it corporate suicide. Harrison called it doing what should have been done years ago. Every morning the headlines tested his resolve. Stock dips as CEO bets on kindness. Investors panic over human-centered policy shift, philanthropy, or folly. The board called emergency meetings almost daily, but Harrison attended few of them. He was on the road. He flew economy. He wore the same gray coat he'd worn as Harry Gibson. He visited stores from New Orleans to Detroit, from Seattle to Nashville, always unannounced. The first time a regional manager recognized him in a dusty stockroom, she nearly dropped her clipboard. "Sir, Mr. Gable, I didn't know." "That's the point," he said. "You shouldn't have to." He didn't inspect sales figures. He asked janitors where the cleaning supplies came from. He spoke to stock clerks about their schedules, to part-time mothers about child care, to aging cashiers about aching knees. And in every store he saw the same thing, the quiet dignity of people who had kept the lights on while the company forgot their names. He began making calls directly from the break rooms. "Replace all fluorescent lighting with warm LEDs," he told the facilities team one afternoon, sitting on a plastic chair beside a soda machine. Get ergonomic mats for register stations. Increase rest breaks by 10 minutes. But, sir, that will cost money, he interrupted, smiling faintly. Good. Let's spend some on the people who earned it. His reforms rippled outward. Anonymous complaints turned into structured councils where employees could voice issues directly to leadership. Internal promotions tripled. The press, hungry for a story, started following him everywhere. Every grainy cell phone video of the billionaire mopping floors or fixing leaky sinks went viral within hours. Then came the turning point no one expected. One afternoon in March, a live broadcast of the annual shareholder meeting cut to Harrison walking onto the stage, not in a suit, but in the same janitor's uniform he'd worn that first night. The room fell silent. "You came for numbers?" he said, voice echoing across the hall. "You'll have them. Revenue dropped 9% this quarter. Dividends will shrink. But theft of wages? Down to 0. Employee retention? Up 40. Public trust? Rising faster than any stock we've ever sold." He looked out over the sea of shocked faces, investors, managers, journalists. Profit built on fear burns bright and dies fast. Profit built on honor burns steady and lights the way. He paused. We forgot that, I forgot that, but we're remembering. Applause started somewhere in the back, timid at first, then swelling. It wasn't unanimous. Some scowled, some walked out, but enough stayed, enough believed. When he left the stage, Eleanor was waiting in the wings. "That was brave," she said. He shook his head. "No, this is just the bill coming due." Outside, snow was falling again, soft, slow, a mirror of the night he'd first heard Chloe's cries. He stopped at the door, watching flakes dissolve against the pavement. "You know," he said quietly, "my father used to tell me that the worth of a name isn't on a building. It's in how people say it when you're not around." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Then I think the name Gable just got its meaning back." That evening, Harrison returned to headquarters to find a letter waiting on his desk. No return address, only a child's handwriting. "Dear Mr. Gable, Mom says you made the bad man go away. Thank you for being like my great-grandpa who helped people. Love, Chloe." He read it twice, the corners of his mouth trembling. He didn't frame it. He folded it neatly, slipped it into his wallet behind his ID, where it would stay. That night, he stood on the roof of the Gable Tower, the city glowing below him, alive again. Wind swept through his hair as he whispered to the skyline, "Ellen, we're finally building something worth keeping." And for the first time in years, he felt light enough to breathe. The reckoning arrived on a Wednesday, the kind of gray morning Chicago wears like a habit. It began with a whistleblower packet, scans of emails, vendor contracts, a spreadsheet that glinted like a knife. The sender was anonymous, but the trail was clean. Kickbacks routed through a shell supplier, bogus sanitation consulting fees, and a line item that led straight to a familiar signature. Victoria Lang had always smiled when others bled. Now the paper smiled back at her. Harrison read the documents twice, then a third time, not to savor them, but to be certain. He called legal, compliance, and the audit chair. He did not call PR. By noon, the board assembled. Victoria entered confident, heels ticking like a metronome. She wore a suit sharp enough to cut and a face practiced at pity. "I assume this is about the quarter," she said, taking her seat as if it were owed rent. "It is," Harrison replied. He slid the printouts across the glossy table, but not the kind you expected. Silence tightened the room. Pages turned, faces changed. Gregory Miles, the CFO, blanched, a hand rising to his jaw. Someone exhaled a curse through their teeth. Victoria didn't look down at first. When she did, her color didn't change. She had been in boardrooms too long to give anyone that satisfaction. "These are fabrications," she said coolly. "Retaliation for holding leadership to account." "The payments route through a Delaware LLC registered to your brother," the audit chair said, voice flat with fury. "The consultant never visited a single store." Victoria lifted her chin. "Every company uses third-party evaluators, not ones that bill 7 figures for ghost reports." Harrison cut in. "Not ones that appear the same month managers like Doyle began slashing supply orders to generate the funds." Her gaze flicked to him then, the first crack, a calculation, misfiring. "You're sentimental, Harrison. You always were. The market will punish you for this crusade. Someone had to protect our yield." He regarded her the way he had once regarded adversaries across negotiating tables, men who confused ruthlessness for vision. Yield without honor is rot. Security stepped into the doorway, not dramatic, just present. Harrison nodded to them, then to Victoria. "Your badge, please." Her hand trembled for the first time. She placed the silver access card on the table, a small surrender that rang like a bell. When she stood, the room watched in a hush that wasn't glee, only sad relief, the kind reserved for storms finally moving offshore. At the threshold, she turned. "You won't survive this," she said softly, almost curious. "Maybe not as we were," Harrison answered, "but as we should be." She left. No applause, no epilogue, just the scrape of a chair and the steadying breath of a company deciding what it wanted to be when no one was watching. A statement went out that afternoon, dry, precise, and merciless. Former board member removed for cause, criminal referral filed, restitution fund established for stores harmed by the scheme. Harrison signed it and then walked downstairs to the break room where George, hand still a little unsteady, was fixing a crooked bulletin board. Harrison held the nails. George smiled without surprise. "Saw the news," he said. "Feels lighter in here." Harrison nodded. "We still have work." "Always did," George replied. "Difference is, now we're doing the right kind." That evening, Harrison passed Doyle in the lobby of a labor tribunal. The once proud manager avoided his eyes, clutching a folder like a life preserver. Harrison did not gloat. He only said, "If you tell the truth, you'll keep more of yourself." Outside, the lake wind smelled like rain. He called Eleanor. "It's done," he said. "Justice?" she asked. "Accountability," he answered. "Justice is what we build next." He hung up and stood for a moment under the honest sky, the city's lights rising like small, stubborn promises. The arrogant had fallen not because he pushed them, but because there was finally nothing left to hold them up. Spring came quietly that year, slipping into the city like forgiveness. The air no longer smelled of snow and exhaust, but of thawed earth and rain on brick. At dawn, the lights inside Gable's flagship store flickered on one by one, not the sterile glare of profit, but a softer glow that spilled across new murals of smiling workers and open doors. Harrison walked through the store before opening, coffee cooling in his hand. The place felt different. People greeted him without stiffness now, calling him by name rather than title. The cleaning crew chatted with sales staff. Managers shared breakfast instead of orders. The building hummed with the low, living sound of belonging. In the children's section, Chloe sat on the floor coloring while her mother reviewed schedules at a nearby desk. When she saw Harrison, she ran up and tugged his sleeve. "Mom says we're going to have a picnic this weekend," she said proudly. "You should come. You never go outside." He chuckled. "I might, if there's pie." She tilted her head seriously. "Mom's apple pie, best in Chicago." He crouched down to her level. "Then I'll be there." As she skipped back to her crayons, Eleanor approached with her tablet tucked under one arm. "You've been here since 6, she said. "You're supposed to be semi-retired." "I'm terrible at it," he admitted. "I tried staying home. The silence was too loud." She smiled. "Then maybe you're exactly where you belong." They stood a moment in the easy quiet, watching Chloe draw. The child's laughter filled the aisle, bright and light, like the sound of the world starting over. Later that evening, Harrison returned to the rooftop terrace of Gable Tower. The city stretched before him, endless and alive. Wind rustled through the potted ivy Eleanor had insisted on planting there. He took from his coat pocket the folded letter Chloe had written months before, the one thanking him for helping her mother. The creases were worn, the ink faded at the edges, but the words still glowed true. He thought of all the letters he'd received in his life, contracts, lawsuits, accolades, and realized this one, written in a child's uncertain hand, was the only one that ever mattered. The skyline shimmered in the dusk. Below, lights flickered across hundreds of Gable stores, each one carrying the promise that people inside were treated not as numbers, but as names. For the first time in years, he felt no weight in his chest, only stillness, the kind that comes when a man finally stops running from his own heart. He whispered into the wind, not to anyone in particular, but to every soul who had once felt unseen. "Thank you for reminding me what a company really is." Then he turned and headed back inside, where laughter rose from the conference hall below and smelled faintly of apple pie.